The crystal wine bottle exploded across the marble floor. Deep red Bordeaux splashed over Santino Greco's custom-made Italian suit. For a full 3 seconds, no one in the restaurant breathed. The most feared mafia boss on the Gulf Coast slowly looked down at the ruined suit, then at the trembling waitress standing in front of him. Her hands were shaking. Broken glass surrounded her feet. I'm sorry, Mr. Greco." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Santino's expression turned to ice. "Do you have any idea how much that bottle cost?" She lowered her head. "Yes." "And you still dropped it?" "Yes." Every customer inside Aurora restaurant expected security to drag the young waitress away immediately. Instead, something much stranger happened. Outside the restaurant, 3 armed men who had been waiting for Santino quietly disappeared into the night. No shots were fired. No one was arrested. And no one realized the waitress had just saved Santino Greco's life. Again, she would never tell him, because if she did, she would die, and Santino would never believe her anyway. For 5 years, everyone inside the Greco organization believed Laura Voss was the worst waitress Aurora restaurant had ever hired. She spilled wine. She ruined expensive dinners. She interrupted important business meetings. She constantly made careless mistakes around the most dangerous man on the Gulf Coast. Managers complained about her. Customers whispered about her. Even the security team called her a walking disaster. Only Alora knew the truth. None of it had ever been an accident. Every broken plate, every spilled drink, every ruined evening had prevented another assassination attempt. She had quietly become the invisible shield standing between Santino Greco and death. And he hated her for it. Santino Greco ruled an empire worth billions. Shipping companies, luxury hotels, private ports, casinos, nightclubs. To the public, he was one of the richest businessmen in America. Behind closed doors, he controlled the most powerful mafia organization on the Gulf Coast. People feared disappointing him. People feared speaking against him. People feared even making eye contact with him. There was only one person who repeatedly embarrassed him in public, Alora Voss, which was exactly why everyone assumed she wouldn't survive much longer. 3 months before the annual Greco Gala, Santino arrived at Aurora for an important private dinner with several international investors. Security swept the building 3 separate times. Every entrance was sealed. Every guest had been screened. Nothing seemed out of place, until Alora noticed a reflection inside the restaurant's enormous glass window. A man standing outside, gray jacket, one hand slowly disappearing beneath his coat. She recognized the movement immediately. Someone reaching for a concealed weapon. She had only 1 second. Not enough time to shout. Not enough time to warn security. Only enough time to make Santino furious. Without hesitation, she deliberately loosened her grip. Crash. The priceless Bordeaux shattered across the floor. Red wine soaked Santino's suit. Guests gasped. Security rushed toward the commotion. The mysterious man outside froze, then quietly disappeared before anyone noticed him. The assassination had failed. Again. "What is wrong with you?" Santino's voice cut through the restaurant. "You embarrass me every single time you come near this table." "I'm sorry. You always are." He took 1 slow step closer. "I don't want to see you anywhere near my VIP section again. If you make one more mistake, you're fired." Alora simply nodded. "I'm sorry, Mr. Greco." She never explained. She never defended herself. She quietly knelt on the marble floor and picked up every broken shard of glass with her bare hands. Tiny pieces sliced into her fingers. Blood mixed with the spilled wine. She didn't even flinch, because pain meant nothing compared to watching Santino die. That night, Alora returned to her tiny apartment overlooking the ocean. She locked the door, reached beneath her bed, and pulled out an old wooden box. Inside were dozens of sealed envelopes. Each carried only a date and a handwritten number. Attempt 8, Attempt 9, Attempt 10. She carefully placed the newest evidence inside. A photograph of the armed man. A restaurant seating chart. A flattened bullet recovered from the street outside Aurora. Then she wrote one final sentence before sealing the envelope. Attempt 11. Prevented. She closed the box and whispered into the empty room. "As long as you're alive, you can hate me forever." Across the city, in the top floor of Greco Tower, another man quietly watched security footage from Aurora Restaurant. His name was Bastian Corelli, and unlike Santino, he knew exactly who Allura Voss really was. He smiled as he replayed the footage of the shattered wine bottle. 11 times, he murmured. You've ruined 11 assassination attempts. He picked up his phone. This ends at the gala. This time, kill the waitress first. Allura had no idea that her final chance to save Santino Greco was only days away. Part 2, shortened. The annual Greco Charity Gala was the biggest event on the Gulf Coast. Billionaires, politicians, celebrities, and powerful businessmen filled the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead while an orchestra played softly in the background. To everyone else, it was a glamorous celebration. To Allura, it was the perfect place for an assassination. Earlier that afternoon, while preparing the ballroom, she noticed a catering employee she had never seen before. His uniform looked authentic, but his behavior didn't. Curious, she quietly followed him into a service hallway. Through a half-open door, she heard two men talking. The poison is colorless. One drop is enough. He'll be dead within minutes after the toast. Allura's blood ran cold. Someone planned to poison Santino's champagne. She wanted to warn security. But after years of seeing every suspicious incident dismissed, she no longer trusted anyone inside the organization. She would have to stop it herself. Again, that evening, the ballroom erupted into applause as Santino Greco entered. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, he walked confidently to the center table. Minutes later, servers began distributing champagne for the ceremonial toast. Then Allura saw it. The same fake catering employee quietly switched one champagne flute before placing the tray in front of Santino. That was the poison glass. There wasn't enough time to explain. As Santino reached for it, Allura deliberately slammed into the server. Crash! Dozens of champagne glasses shattered across the marble floor. The poison glass disappeared among the broken pieces. The ballroom fell silent. Santino slowly stood. His expression turned ice cold. You destroy everything you touch. His voice echoed through the room. You've embarrassed me for the last time. You're fired. Every guest stared as security escorted Allura toward the exit. She never argued. She simply whispered, I'm sorry, because she'd rather lose her job than watch Santino lose his life. Watching from across the ballroom, Bastian Corelli smiled. Allura had ruined another assassination attempt. He quietly spoke into the hidden earpiece beneath his collar. The target is leaving. A cold voice answered. Understood. Bastian took one final sip of whiskey. This time, make sure she never comes back. Outside, heavy rain poured over the empty streets. Allura walked away from the hotel alone. She never noticed the black SUV slowly pulling away from the curb behind her. Inside, four armed men were waiting. And for the first time in 5 years, Allura was no longer hunting the assassins. She had become their target. Rain poured relentlessly across the Gulf Coast. The city lights blurred behind sheets of water as Allura walked alone along the nearly deserted sidewalk. She pulled her thin coat tighter around herself, her waitress uniform still damp from the champagne she had spilled only minutes earlier. Her cheeks still burned from Santino's words. You destroy everything you touch. She had heard worse over the past 5 years. It still hurt. Not because he hated her. She had made peace with that long ago. It hurt because she knew he would never understand why she kept choosing to become the villain in his story. She glanced at the small waitress badge tucked safely inside her handbag. The tiny GPS transmitter hidden beneath it blinked once. Still working. Good. She smiled faintly to herself. He's alive. That was enough. Half a mile away, a black SUV followed silently through the rain. Its headlights remained off. Inside, 4 men watched her every move. The driver slowed the vehicle. She's alone. The man in the passenger seat nodded. No security. No witnesses. Another checked the suppressor attached to his pistol before shaking his head. The boss wants her alive. For now. The driver smirked. She won't be talking for long. Allura turned into a narrow alley that led toward the employee parking lot. Normally the path was busy. Tonight, it was completely empty. Too empty. She stopped walking. Something felt wrong. Years of quietly protecting Santino had sharpened instincts most people never developed. She listened. Nothing. Then, footsteps. Behind her. Slow. Deliberate. She turned. 3 men stood at the entrance of the alley. A 4th blocked the opposite end. Every escape route had disappeared. One of the men smiled. "Miss Voss, we've been looking for you." Alora took one careful step backward. "Who are you? You asked too many questions." Another man reached into his jacket. She expected a gun. Instead, he pulled out a syringe. A clear liquid shimmered inside. Her heart skipped a beat. She ran. She sprinted toward the opposite end of the alley. The fourth man lunged forward. Alora grabbed a metal trash can and shoved it into him with all her strength. The heavy container crashed to the ground, buying her only a second. She slipped past him and burst into the street. Cars sped by through the rain. She waved desperately. "Help!" No one stopped. Behind her, the men were already closing the distance. One grabbed her arm. She twisted violently and drove her elbow into his ribs. He cursed and lost his grip. She kept running. Her lungs burned. Her shoes slipped on the wet pavement. Then, a pair of bright headlights appeared directly ahead. The black SUV accelerated. Too fast. Much too fast. Alora tried to dodge. The vehicle clipped her shoulder with enough force to throw her onto the soaked asphalt. Pain exploded through her body. Before she could stand, two men jumped out. One covered her mouth. The other forced the syringe into her neck. Everything blurred. The rain, the lights, the voices. The world faded into darkness. When Alora opened her eyes again, she was no longer outside. The air smelled of rust, salt water, and damp concrete. She blinked slowly. A single bare light bulb swung overhead. Her wrists were tied tightly to a steel chair. Every muscle ached. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow. She tested the ropes. Too tight. Someone had known exactly how to restrain her. A slow clap echoed through the room. She lifted her head. A man stepped out of the shadows. Expensive shoes. Tailored black suit. Leather gloves. His face remained hidden beneath the dim light. "I have to admit," he said with a quiet chuckle, "you're much harder to kill than I expected." Alora stared at him without speaking. The man crouched until they were eye level. "You've ruined far too many plans. For 5 years. You've been the invisible problem no one could solve." He smiled. "But tonight, that finally changes." Alora's breathing slowed. She didn't ask who he was. She already understood one thing. Whoever stood in front of her, he wasn't working alone. Someone inside Santino Greco's organization had been helping him all along. And that realization was far more terrifying than the ropes binding her to the chair. The man circled Alora slowly, his polished shoes echoing across the damp concrete floor. He stopped behind her chair. "You know," he said calmly, "most people would have given up after the first few failures." He leaned closer. "But not you." His voice carried an unsettling admiration. "You ruined poisoned drinks. You changed seating arrangements. You delayed meetings. You even made Santino stand up seconds before a chandelier crushed his chair." He laughed quietly. 5 years. You've been protecting him for 5 years. Alora's heart sank. They knew. Not just about tonight. About everything. She kept her expression blank. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man smiled. Still pretending. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick folder. One by one, photographs slid onto the floor. Alora spilling the Bordeaux. Alora dropping the serving tray. Alora changing Santino's dinner reservation. Alora blocking a hallway moments before a sniper had taken position. Every incident. Every sacrifice. Someone had been watching her just as closely as she had been watching Santino. "You were never invisible," the man whispered. "We simply allowed you to believe you were." He crouched beside her. "Tell me, who else knows?" "No one." "I don't believe you. It's the truth." A gloved hand suddenly struck her across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the warehouse. Blood appeared at the corner of her lip. "You have one last chance. Who have you been reporting to?" Alora slowly turned back toward him. "No one." Another blow. Harder this time. She nearly fell with the chair. Still, she refused to speak. Across the city, the gala had finally come to an uneasy end. Guests quietly left the ballroom, still talking about the waitress who had ruined the champagne toast. Santino stood alone inside his private office overlooking the harbor. His tuxedo jacket rested across a chair. A half-filled glass of whiskey sat untouched on his desk. Something wouldn't leave his mind. Alora's face. She had apologized, but there had been something unusual in her eyes. Not fear, not embarrassment, desperation, almost as if she had been trying to stop something. He dismissed the thought. She was simply careless. wasn't she? A knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Rocco entered. We've reviewed the security footage. And no evidence of sabotage. So she really did ruin the event. It appears that way. Santino stared silently through the rain-covered window. Fire her. Rocco nodded. It'll be done tonight. Back inside the warehouse, one of the kidnappers hurried over. Boss, we searched her apartment. The masked man looked up. And we found this. He handed over a small wooden box. Alora's eyes widened. No, the box. The letters. The evidence. Everything was inside. The man slowly opened it. Dozens of envelopes, each carefully labeled with dates stretching back 5 years. He pulled out one folded letter at random. As he read the first few lines, his smile faded. His eyes narrowed. Then, he laughed. So that's the secret. He looked directly at Alora. You actually love him. Silence. You let him humiliate you. Just to keep him alive. He held another letter in the air. He never even knew. Alora closed her eyes. The only thing she had wanted to protect was now in the hands of the enemy. The masked man tossed the letters back into the box. What a tragic love story. He slowly drew a knife from inside his jacket. The blade gleamed beneath the swinging light. Unfortunately, he said almost casually, love makes people dangerous. He placed the cold edge of the knife beneath Alora's chin. And dangerous people don't get happy endings. Just then, a cell phone vibrated inside his pocket. He answered immediately. Yes. His expression changed. The body. A long pause. No, not yet. He glanced toward Alora. Understood. He ended the call and smiled. It seems our employer has changed the plan. No more questions. No more games. He stepped back and nodded toward the others. Finish it. 2 men moved toward Alora. One raised a heavy steel pipe. The other reached for the ropes, binding her wrists. Alora knew she had only seconds left. If she couldn't escape now, Santino Greco would never learn the truth, and the people trying to kill him would finally succeed. The kidnappers never struck the final blow. A phone suddenly rang inside the warehouse. The masked man answered, listened for a few seconds, then nodded. Change of plans. The boss wants her gone. Minutes later, Alora's wrists were bound. A black hood covered her face, and she was thrown into the back of an SUV. The vehicle disappeared into the rainy night. At 1:47 a.m., Santino Greco stood alone in his penthouse. For reasons he couldn't explain, something felt terribly wrong. He pressed the intercom. Rocco. Yes, boss. Where's the waitress? A brief silence. She left after the gala. No one has seen her since. Santino's expression hardened. Find her. Now. Within minutes, Greco security teams searched the city. Her apartment. Empty. The restaurant. Nothing. Hospitals. Nothing. It was as if Alora Voss had vanished without a trace. Just before sunrise, the SUV stopped beside an isolated beach. The kidnappers dragged Alora onto the wet sand. Bruised, bleeding, barely alive. Before leaving, the masked man slipped her silver waitress badge back into her uniform pocket. Then they drove away, leaving her alone with the rising tide. At 6:18 a.m., Santino's phone rang. Boss, we found a waitress badge. Whose? A painful pause. Alora Voss. Less than 15 minutes later, Santino arrived at South Harbor Beach. He ran across the sand and dropped beside her motionless body. For one terrifying moment, he thought he was too late. Then he checked her pulse. Weak, but alive. Medic. As paramedics rushed forward, Santino noticed something tightly clenched inside her hand. A tiny shard of crystal. A fragment from the champagne glass shattered at the gala. Its edge still carried traces of a clear chemical residue. She hadn't broken the glasses by accident. She had kept the evidence. For the first time, Santino wondered if everything he believed about Alora had been a lie. Inside the ambulance, doctors fought to keep her alive. While checking her injuries, a folded letter slipped from her sleeve. Across the front were 3 simple words. For Santino. He carefully unfolded it. Most of the ink had been washed away, but several lines remained. If you're reading this, I probably failed. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you one last time. I know you hated every mistake I made, every spilled drink, every ruined meeting, every changed plan. But I'd rather spend my whole life letting you hate me than watch you die. The final sentence was barely visible. Please stay alive. Santino stared silently at the letter. Then memories flooded back. The shattered Bordeaux, the fallen chandelier, the canceled meetings, the delayed flights. Every incident he had called carelessness. Every time she had simply apologized, never explaining, never defending herself. For the first time, he realized none of it had been accidental. Doctors rushed Alora into emergency surgery. Outside the operating room, Rocco arrived carrying a wooden evidence box recovered from her apartment. Inside were dozens of envelopes. Attempt 1. Attempt 2. Attempt 47. Each envelope contained photographs, reports, and handwritten notes documenting another assassination attempt against Santino. A bomb beneath his car, a sniper waiting in a restaurant, a sabotaged helicopter. Every attack, every rescue, every sacrifice. For 5 years, Alora had secretly saved his life over and over again. At the bottom of the box lay a leather notebook. Inside was a detailed timeline of every assassination attempt, complete with names, security failures, and camera blind spots. Only one conclusion remained. Someone inside Santino's own organization had been helping the killers. Santino slowly closed the notebook. Seal every security record. No one leaves headquarters. His voice was colder than ever. They didn't just try to kill me. He looked through the operating room window at the woman still fighting for her life. They tried to silence the only person who kept me alive. For the first time in years, Santino Greco wasn't thinking about power. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about one waitress, and praying he would get one chance to tell her the words she had waited 5 years to hear. I'm sorry. The operating room doors finally opened just after sunrise. The lead surgeon removed his mask and looked directly at Santino. Mr. Greco, we were able to stop the internal bleeding. Santino didn't blink. And she's alive. A breath he hadn't realized he was holding escaped his chest. But the surgeon's expression remained serious. The next 24 hours are critical. If she wakes up, she has an excellent chance of making a full recovery. If she doesn't, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. For the first time in decades, Santino Greco canceled every meeting on his calendar. The man who had built an empire through discipline and control refused to leave a single chair beside Alora's hospital bed. Hour after hour, he sat in silence. The blood-stained letter remained folded inside his jacket pocket. He had read it so many times that he could recite every word from memory. Each sentence felt heavier than the one before it. Not because it reminded him how much she loved him, but because it reminded him how cruelly he had misunderstood her. Meanwhile, Greco Intelligence launched the largest internal investigation in the organization's history. Every security recording from the past 5 years was recovered. Every employee's communication records were examined. Every financial transaction was traced. The deeper investigators dug, the uglier the truth became. Patterns began to emerge. Security cameras mysteriously failed only during assassination attempts. Schedules were altered minutes before attacks. Confidential travel plans had been leaked repeatedly. Someone inside the organization had orchestrated everything. Then came the breakthrough. A forensic analyst enlarged footage from the charity gala. For less than 2 seconds, a catering employee secretly transferred a clear liquid into one champagne flute. Another camera captured someone remotely disabling the hallway surveillance. The authorization code belonged to only one executive, Bastian Corelli. Santino watched the footage in complete silence. No anger, no shouting, only silence. Then he gave one order. Bring him in. Bastian was escorted into the executive boardroom later that afternoon. Nearly every senior member of the Greco organization was present. Rocco stood beside the entrance. Lawyers, executives, security commanders. No one understood why they had been summoned. Bastian smiled confidently as he entered. You wanted to see me? Santino remained seated at the head of the table. Sit. Bastian obeyed. For several long moments, no one spoke. Then Santino placed a single crystal shard on the conference table. The broken champagne glass. The laboratory confirmed traces of tetrodotoxin, a deadly poison. The room erupted with whispers. Bastian's smile faded ever so slightly. Santino placed another item beside it. Alora's waitress badge. Hidden inside was the miniature GPS transmitter. She wasn't spying on me. She was protecting me. Next came the leather notebook. The envelopes. The photographs. The letters. Every assassination attempt. Every rescue. Every sacrifice. Every insult she had quietly endured. Finally, The forensic footage appeared on the large screen behind Santino. The fake waiter, the poisoned champagne, the disabled cameras, the access authorization. Bastian Corelli. The room fell completely silent. Bastian slowly leaned back in his chair. Then, he laughed. So, you finally figured it out. Several guards immediately raised their weapons. Bastian showed no fear. You know what your greatest weakness was, Santino. You never questioned the people closest to you. You questioned the waitress. You questioned the innocent. But never me. His smile widened. I counted on your pride. And I was right. He glanced toward the evidence. She ruined 47 assassination attempts. I couldn't let her keep ruining the 48th. Before he could say another word, Rocco stepped forward and placed him in handcuffs. This time, no one objected. 3 days later, Alora finally opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was sunlight pouring through the hospital window. The second was Santino. He looked nothing like the man she had known for 5 years. His tie was gone. His beard had begun to grow. Dark circles rested beneath his exhausted eyes. He looked as though he hadn't slept since the night of the gala. When he realized she was awake, he stood so quickly his chair nearly fell over. Alora. Her voice was barely a whisper. You are alive. He let out a quiet laugh. You saved me. Again. Tears filled her eyes. I couldn't let you die. Santino slowly shook his head. No, I couldn't let you die. Understood. He carefully took her hand. The same hand he had watched bleed while picking broken glass from the restaurant floor. I'm sorry. The words came slowly, but they were real. I'm sorry for every time I humiliated you. For every time I called you careless. For every moment I judged you without knowing the truth. His voice broke. You spent 5 years protecting my life. And I spent 5 years breaking your heart. A tear rolled down Alora's cheek. She gently squeezed his hand. You were worth saving. No. He shook his head again. You were. 6 months later, the Gulf Coast had changed. Bastian Corelli had been convicted alongside every surviving member of the conspiracy. The corrupt security network had been dismantled. Rocco publicly accepted responsibility for ignoring warning signs and resigned from his position. For the first time in years, Santino's empire was no longer built on blind trust. It was built on truth. Late one afternoon, Santino drove Alora to the quiet stretch of beach where he had found her. The ocean was calm now. Golden sunlight reflected across the waves. They walked silently until they reached the exact place where the tide had nearly carried her away forever. Santino stopped, then slowly knelt on one knee. From his pocket, he removed a small velvet box. Inside rested a simple diamond ring. No reporters, no bodyguards, no audience, just the two of them. I once thought power meant controlling everything. He looked into her eyes. You taught me that real strength is trusting someone enough to let them protect you. His voice softened. I'm not asking you to marry me because you saved my life. I'm asking because I want to spend the rest of mine loving you the way you always deserved. Tears filled Alora's eyes. She smiled through them. I'll marry you. She paused just long enough to make him nervous. On one condition. He smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. Anything. She gently touched his cheek. The next time I tell you something is wrong, you'll believe me. A quiet laugh escaped him. I promise. Not as your boss. Not as a mafia boss. But as the man who will spend every day earning your trust. She slipped the ring onto her finger, then wrapped her arms around him. As the sun slowly disappeared beneath the horizon, they stood together where tragedy had nearly stolen everything from them. No longer a feared mafia boss and a misunderstood waitress. No longer separated by power, pride, or painful misunderstandings. Just two people who had survived betrayal, sacrifice, and heartbreak. And finally found the kind of love that neither wealth nor power could ever buy. Every story leaves something behind. Some leave us with excitement. Some leave us with heartbreak. And a few leave us with a lesson we carry long after the screen goes dark. Santino Greco spent years believing strength meant control. He thought authority was measured by how little emotion he showed and how quickly he could silence anyone who questioned him. Yet the person who protected him more than anyone else was never the strongest soldier in the room. She carried no weapon, wore no armor, and never demanded recognition. Her greatest strength was quiet courage. Alora Voss never saved him because she expected gratitude. She never risked her life hoping for wealth, power, or even love in return. She simply believed that doing the right thing mattered more than receiving credit for it. In a world built on fear and betrayal, her kindness became the rarest form of bravery. Sometimes the people who love us the most are not the ones who speak the loudest. They are the ones who quietly stand beside us, solving problems before we even know they exist. They sacrifice their comfort, their pride, and sometimes even their happiness without asking for applause. Sadly, those are often the people we take for granted until life forces us to see their true value. This story reminds us that pride can blind us, assumptions can destroy trust, and harsh words often leave wounds that no apology can fully erase. It also reminds us that real strength is not found in power or status, but in humility, the willingness to listen, to admit we were wrong, and to treasure the people who have always been there for us. Never wait until someone is gone to realize how much they meant to you. Never mistake quiet loyalty for weakness, and never confuse kindness with helplessness. The strongest hearts are often the ones that suffer in silence while continuing to protect the people they love. If this story touched your heart, remember to treat those around you with a little more patience, a little more gratitude, and a little more compassion. Sometimes a simple thank you, a sincere apology, or a moment of understanding can change someone's life forever. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There are many more unforgettable stories waiting for you, and your next favorite one may be just a click away.